Hello and welcome to Designer Discussions with Jason and Miriam. Today's guest is Jen Rutgers from Vestibule Learning. She's here to talk with us about the very recent kitchen and bath industry show, which she's going to provide highlights on. Welcome to the Designer Discussions podcast with
Jason,
Maria,
and Miriam. Tune in each week where we talk about marketing, PR, and business advice for design professionals.
Nice to have you here, Jan. So, we usually have you on every year just to talk about highlights from what happened at the KBIS show. So if you could just give us a brief overview.
No, sounds great. Thanks, Jason and Miriam. And I really look forward every year to doing this podcast because it actually forces me to kind of go through all my images, and I counted. I had close to 900 pictures that I took while I was at KBIS. So it's you guys really encourage me or force me to get everything organized to be able to talk about really what I saw, and for me to be able to just kind of put everything into context. So just kind of based on that, I'll kind of ramble along, and I know Jason and Miriam, you'll jump in. But as I was kind of going through all the images, that I'm always kind of looking for themes, and we've seen different themes, especially since I think it was 2022 when it was the first KBIS that came back. That was kind of the real shocker, that all of a sudden we saw, I saw such a softening, of everything, like curves and arches and things like that. So, that's still continuing. But I think the biggest trend that I saw at KBIS is what I'm calling what's old is new again. And, I was talking with some manufacturers, and we were all kind of chuckling about, different things that we're seeing in the displays at KBIS are, just stuff that the veterans, like myself, that have been in the industry forever, we're seeing a regurgitating of these. So I just kind of I've made a list here myself of different things, and I'll throw in a few comments from some of the manufacturers that I talked about. But it's definitely seeing just some of the things that we were doing with kitchens, say even 15, 20 years ago, that are starting to creep back in. So some examples of that are kitchen cabinet doors. Well, yes, there was a lot of, shaker. We still see a lot of shaker doors, but it was not dominant the way that it had been in the past. We're seeing a lot more detail in doors and drawer fronts. And, that was something like a lot of recessed panel, like a shaker door is a recessed panel door, with that inside sticking being the shaker. But I was seeing beaded insides. I was seeing chamfered insides. I was just seeing that detail that, I was used to, as a kitchen designer, years ago, which, to me, was really exciting. I was getting kind of bored with everything being that strict. White shaker. You know what? I don't think I saw a single white shaker kitchen. I may have to kind of go through again, but that was really interesting. I also saw a lot of, so again, recessed panel doors, but the interior panels are starting to get detail. A few years ago, it was kind of the introduction of that fluting look, but this year, I was seeing wallpaper, put inside a panel. Now that's almost a throwback to the 70s, long before I started designing kitchens. But I remember, ripping out kitchens that had wallpaper on their panels in the kitchen cabinets. But I saw that, and the metal mesh inserts. So when I say, what's old is new again, back in the day when people used to have those stereo stacks of all of this different equipment that produced a lot of heat, we were building and specifying entertainment units with these metal mesh in the front of it just for air circulation. And I saw a ton of that just throughout the show, that They weren't using it for air circulation, but just as a decorative element. We also, I even came across one display that had louvered panels on the inside of the cabinet doors. Now, it was for a under-counter laundry area where they had built-in European washer and dryer behind doors. So definitely, looking at it, but looking at air circulation there. But, it gave a nice kind of cottagey, look I hadn't seen for a while. Another thing with the doors, I had a whole list here of things on the doors, but another one was traditional mullioned glass doors. So glass doors with those traditional crossbars, mullions. So that's not something that I'd seen for a while, like because it is a bit more traditional. But I was seeing that. I was seeing some X mullions behind with the glass doors, and I also one that really made me chuckle is in 1999, I built the designer home and put in an award-winning kitchen. I just loved. And I remember what I did is I took a standard recess panel door and I added, wood mullions, to the door. Some of them I did in glass, but some of them I did in just veneer panels, just to add some detail, to that shaker door that was so popular back then. And here I'm walking around in the display, and I saw that exact door that I had designed for my home like 25 years ago. So that was,
wow,
and I know where it's coming from. We've got a whole new generation of kitchen designers. A lot of our designers are millennials. Well, they may not, they haven't experienced those types of looks in their design. So to them, this is going to be something new and exciting. And, and I think that's why some of the veteran manufacturers that I was around, talking with were telling me, we had discontinued tons of this stuff out of our catalogs, a decade or more ago, and now we're having to bring it all back in. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. But just kind of looking at a few more things with the doors, I actually even saw some stained glass doors, as a glass insert, doing some stained glass. One of them, I think it was kind of a Frank Lloyd Wright kind of craftsman look, but and then one though was really quite traditional with little circles of little crystals inside a leaded glass door in a principal bathroom, which wasn't something that we've seen for quite a while. The doors with cutouts, like using the CNC and taking that panel and cutting out maybe a flower or something like that. I saw a couple examples of that. And I even saw, and again, you'll probably chuckle with this one, Jason, I even saw a couple of raised panel doors. We have not seen raised panel doors, it seems like for years, and some mitered doors. So I think this is going to be something for us to really watch. What's going to happen with cabinet doors? And I think that, a lot of the techniques that we were perfecting in the early 2000s with really pushing the envelope on cabinet doors, I think we're going to start seeing that again because, consumers, designers, are getting kind of bored, of the same old. And we do have the technology to do a lot of this. So that I'm going to put it out there. I feel that's going to be a trend, definitely a detail with our cabinet doors. Does it make sense to you guys on seeing it? Then, so another thing, scrolling through all the images I started to see was kitchen material. So what's kind of old is new again. Definitely stained wood. We had gone through painted cabinetry in the last 10 years, as the predominant finish. But I would have to say every cabinet manufacturer and a lot of the other manufacturers that use cabinetry as a backdrop, like the appliance people and the plumbing people, the countertop people, we're seeing a ton of natural woods, natural rift cut white oak, natural walnut, or other woods that are stained in light colors. I even saw a cherry wood kitchen display, which, kind of shocked me a little bit, but, they added some really cool detail to it. But it's just, again, re-exploring the wood, and I could see it. Like, I would almost guess that there was a lot of millennials that were designing these displays, and to them, this is new and exciting. So it was nice to see. I personally love wood cabinetry. I think that it has more longevity, that it's kind of tougher than a painted finish. So I was really happy to see that coming out. For other materials, natural stone. Of course, there were a tremendous amount of quartz displays there, but I was starting to see the countertop manufacturers introducing natural stones and using natural stones, which again we were doing a couple of decades ago. That was it. We only had granite and marble to choose from. We didn't have quartz. I think I'll have to check my dates, but I think quartz kind of came in around '05, heavily into the market. And again, people start seeing, kind of the same thing, over and over again. And, natural stone with the natural variations is something that is attracting buyers. So, actually saw that a lot in the peripheral, what I call the peripheral displays. They weren't actually the cabinet manufacturers, but the appliance manufacturers and plumbing, using a lot of natural stone. And decorative hardware. Hardware's always been, something that's been around, but I definitely saw the displays playing a lot more with hardware, which again, we used to do a lot in the past, of really adding a lot of detail. So seeing a lot of decorative hardware and all of the options and just playing and having fun with it. It's something I remember doing, as a young designer, to really give that individuality to my projects. And I thought it was really nice to see it, because it's a fabulous way for a designer to get a custom look, on a budget. What else? Okay, kitchen details. And again, this was one I was just having lots of chuckles as I was walking around. And it was in one display that actually, and they won for their display. It was actually the Fabuwood display, and in one of their vignettes, they had a wall of cabinetry that terminated in round open shelves on the wall cabinets and the base cabinets. We used to refer to them as knick-knack shelves, years ago. It's not floating shelves. It's a, kind of an L-shaped, box with radius wood shelves on the end. And that one really brought back memories. I can't believe how many knick-knack shelves, I would have designed, into kitchens in the late 90s and early 2000s. Have not seen those in catalogs for years and years, but I can see that they'll be coming back. Along that same area of the radius knick-knack shelves, were the radius cabinet doors. And I was talking with the Plain and Fancy cabinet manufacturer, and he was we got talking about it, and I went, oh my goodness, again, what's old is new again. And he said, you're so right, Jan. We removed these doors from our catalog in 2015, and now we got to put them back in because of the demand. Like they hung around, like people hadn't been ordering them at all. But it was really interesting that soft geometry look is bringing back products that were in manufacturers' catalog decades ago. So again, kind of keeping with the radius, eyebrow arches. I was kind of the eyebrow arch queen of the early 2000s. I did a ton of arched cabinets, and an eyebrow arch is, rather than having a full arch on a single door, that you have a half arch where two doors come together to make a big wide arch. So these eyebrow arched doors, great way to get this look. I got to say, I'm glad to see some of the cabinet manufacturers bringing it back, because I think it's a fabulous way for a designer to get that look without having to radius a whole custom cabinet. Another one that I saw in the details was beadboard behind open shelves. We used to do that all the time, especially during that early 2000s, where it was kind of that Tuscan influence was everywhere, and we were wanting to get detail. So you'd have an open glass door cabinet or open shelf cabinet. Often we would then stick a beadboard panel in the back of it just to add more texture. So I saw that coming through in some of the displays. Plinth feet or kick feet, so little details at the kick area of little feet, little arches. Was seeing that as detail. Again, another early 2000 look that we saw coming out, and I think they're just reinventing it on how we can do it in a more modern way. Mm-hmm. Island posts that, I did see. Well, maybe I saw a couple ultra contemporary European kitchens, but most of the kitchens that I saw, were heavily detailed. So, having posts at the end of the island or at the end of a run, that it wasn't just a flat panel, that there was that detailed. And, now again, I didn't see this everywhere, but I did see a pot rack in one of the displays, and I'm getting a chuckle from Jason there. And like personally, I'm a cook. I like all my stuff handy there. I've been okay with pot racks. I think in the right situation, they're good. So it was fun to see there was a metal manufacturer there showcasing a pot rack, which was kind of cool. And a couple of displays, really traditional, stacked crown moldings, pilasters, the kind of real panel molding added onto the cabinetry for details. Haven't seen that in a long, long time. So, one display that I saw, very much over the top with it, but, it could be the beginning of bringing back that traditional detail. With the countertops, like just looking at different materials, with the countertops, I definitely was seeing a lot of edge treatments that were way beyond the square edge, or the, just kind of that, I don't even know what we call it anymore, but that basic square edge, eased edge, which was the only thing that you ever got the countertops manufacturers to do in the last decade. There were a ton of ogees and double ogees and bullnose, different looks. And, that was huge, in my market when granite came into the marketplace in the 90s. Had a lot of great, fabricators in my area. Being a port city, we were bringing in a lot of granite, and I remember doing so many decorative edge treatments on my granite. And for the last decade, we've seen just kind of that square edge. Every display, I'd have to say, had some edge treatment on their countertops. And and again, they're kind of in one display, I found it kind of interesting, is they actually did the ogee on the bottom edge of the countertop, not the top edge. Funny enough, the only time you saw it is if you were sitting down, and looking back at it, like you could. So that, I'm going to watch that one to just see, is it worth the investment? If you don't really see it. But there was a lot of edge treatments coming in. And another thing that a few of the places was starting to showcase was thermal forming of the countertop material, because they're able to get the countertops much thinner. Now, this is something, when I say what's old is new again, I used a lot of the Corian product in my practice, and we'd thermal form that all the time because you could just heat it up. But that wasn't something that I had seen for a long, long time. And now the countertop manufacturers, with the porcelains and being able to get down to 1 cm thickness in their countertops, there were a lot of them experimenting with thermal forming the countertops. So that's going to open up, a lot of creativity, which I did see with the Corian product, especially in the first decade of the century, that there were a lot of designers really playing with that material and, heating it up and getting into these more organic shapes, which makes sense that we're seeing more organic. It's not as square and hard, everything. So I think that's going to be a real fun one to watch. Uh, Room details. So when I'm in looking at the displays and snapping pictures, it's not just about the actual cabinetry and the countertop. I like to look at the background. And this was a year where I was seeing a lot of traditional elements in the background, specifically at the Kohler, booth. They had Studio Ogee, had a big display area, and everything that she did in there was on the traditional side, like cased arches and wide crown moldings and baseboards and casings and panel molding, and a lot of detail on the walls that kind of echoed what was going on with the cabinetry. But still a modern take. Like, it still felt modern, but it definitely was bringing that traditional look into a modern kitchen. And probably we're just not ignoring the walls anymore and the ceiling, that they're getting part of the kitchen. So that, I think, is going to be a trend for designers to watch. Don't ignore that fifth wall, your ceiling, or those blank walls, or those casings. That flat stock is not the end all be all to finishing off a room. That's layering in and adding some more of this detail or texture. And then looking at that, so I would kind of say overall it was kind of what's old is new again, but there were a couple of other things that I did see that I felt was new to the market. And the first one was appliance color. We have been seeing a lot of color in appliances in the last 5 years. That's been a real highlight of color. This year, the color was all matte. So we, typically when you're painting in an appliance, the same like when you're painting a car, there's a glossiness to the finish. The appliance manufacturers, just about all of them that I saw, were introducing matte finishes. So that's going to be interesting to see. I don't know how it stands up or what process, but you can see that they've all been working on it, because almost every upper end appliance manufacturer display I had a look at had beautiful colors, but in matte finishes. And now here's something I think we got to be watching for. There were a ton of closet displays. So I'm thinking, is the closet going to become that next room that that the kitchen designer, the cabinet designer, is really going to be able to have fun with? A little bit of what's old is new again. I remember designing luxe closets, almost my entire career. I've always used kitchen cabinetry and vanity cabinetry, and reimagined them into these deluxe luxe closets. But I was kind of a little bit shocked about how many just closet manufacturers were displaying, and like high end and just as tricked out as any kitchen. So that I'm going to predict that's going to be kind of our next room. We've had the luxe laundry room, we've had the home office, we've had the media wall, we've had the pantry. So I'm going to say it's going to be the closet. It's going to be the next big one. And just a couple of little things, maybe not a trend, but I was at one tile manufacturer distributor, and just something that really caught my eye was these huge format tiles that looks like wallpaper. So here was a way to it's going to be an investment, and it's going to be a long-term investment to put massive floral tiles on your walls. But I think it's just the technology. It's just getting so much better for our products, for them to be able to print on it. That kind of the new thing was, okay, what can we print onto a product? Like, even with the tile, I did pop over to the IBIS side, just for a couple of hours, and I saw that Schluter, who is a manufacturer of tile trim pieces, you could now provide a sample to them and they would custom print your edge treatment to match the tile. So no longer did you just have the basic metals and basic colors. Like if you had that tile that was that floral, you could send a sample to the Schluter manufacturer and have it printed right onto your edge trim. So I thought, that's the kind of technology coming back. And the last one that I've got here on my list of new stuff was going back to the countertops, and it is showing really thin countertops. Now, funny enough, we could probably go that's old as new again. That when I visited the Eurocachina show in 2010, that was something that really struck me was so many of the displays showed these really thin, like 1 and 2 cm countertops rather than the 3 to 4 cm that we've been doing here in North America. But it's definitely catching up, and there was a lot of 2 cm countertops on display, a lot of thin ones. And I was in one cabinet manufacturer that had it, and so a question I had, for the rep that I was talking to, and going, well, have you modified the cabinet boxes to raise them up higher, because this counter seems a little low. So it's anything that we change in our industry, and they had not, and that's why the countertop felt too low. But the designer, when you see these new things, you really want to be thinking about them, and something of, it is a new way of looking at the proportion in a kitchen, having these thin countertops, but you still need functionality. You don't all of a sudden want to be dropping the height of your countertops, because you haven't thought about, everything being pulled together. So, that's that. And then maybe, the countertop people or the slab producers are doing a lot of experimenting, and I saw a lot of texture that was happening. And I guess they've been able to figure out how to add texture to countertops or backsplashes or vertical applications and still make them easy to maintain, because that you don't want to be getting grit in there. But they were talking a lot about that in the booth. So that is kind of my overview of what I saw, and I'm sure there's other things, but I guess maybe just to wrap up, detail, looking at some of that stuff that was being done in our industry 25, 30 years ago. How's it being reinvented and being brought back?
I love it. I love it. So last year, I was just looking over the notes from last year. You touched a lot on color, on how over the years it built up, and last year it was you saw it all over the place. So what did you think about the color this year at the show?
It's continuing. That when I'm in a fairly traditional cabinet manufacturer's display and they have a hot pink kitchen, then we know that color. Like I saw hot pink, I saw mauve or mauve, kind of that light purpley tone. I saw like lots of light greens and navies. Yeah, color was everywhere. And and I'm glad you bring it up, Jason, because in years past, the color in the cabinetry was mostly coming from the appliance manufacturers and the plumbing manufacturers and the countertop manufacturers, sometimes using cabinetry, as part of their displays, and they weren't selling cabinetry, so they could take a risk and do something. This year, I was seeing it with the cabinet manufacturers. So that is a big switch, that they're introducing those finishes and those colors into their offering now, whereas they used to be just so conservative.
Remind me again, how many pictures did you take?
You know what? I did count them, close to 900.
Okay. And I looked at last year, you took over 650. So you are amazing at looking at the show at a certain vantage point. So for the designers out there, because I often get asked, there's so much to see. How do you organize what you see over the show? And if you had somebody new, a designer that hasn't ever been to this show or any shows, how would you advise them to look at it and take all of this in? Because it's a lot. It could be overwhelming.
It absolutely is a great question because I actually wrote a blog on this, probably 3 years ago. But here's my strategy is, so I always arrive to the show the day before. And, it's a little basic thing. The venue is open. Like you can't go into the display, but I go down and get my pass. I make sure I've got my lanyard, I've got my pass, and I'm ready to go. The first day, I always kind of go to that outlying pavilion, typically with KBIS. And, in Las Vegas, they've kind of got South Hall, which is the big hall, and they've got West Hall. Here in Orlando, they had, I think it was West Hall and North Hall or South Hall. I grab a catalog that first day too, so that I look at the map, I look at where everybody is, and I determined, and I always do this with the shows, that I determine kind of what is kind of the peripheral hall. Still got stuff I want to see, but maybe doesn't have the big names, like the big Kohler, Monogram, some of the larger manufacturers. Typically they're all jumbled in one hall. So what I do is I go to that first day, I go to that peripheral hall, because a lot of people go to the big hall the first day and it's crazy crowded. So I go over to that other one. I spend the whole day there. And, I have got my phone out with me. And as I'm walking through, I am taking, a lot of pictures because when I go back, I can kind of look at them. But, and I'm very systematic that, I kind of walk in, I go to the right, and I just do a grid pattern to make sure that I kind of hit everything. The second day, I tend to go to the big hall. And the big hall is where I want to, just kind of look at what, everything that's going on, get the vibe. But I actually stay out of the big booths, the big popular booths on that day, because they're crowded as can be. And it's difficult to get in and see them and get pictures. So I get a good grounding on what's happening. And on that same on that first day, I'm able to walk the whole show to be able to see where it is. But as I said, I don't go into Kohler on that first day. I don't go into Monogram. And then the last day, because everybody's leaving Wednesday night and Thursday morning, that's when I go and look at those big booths that I'm really interested in, or that there's been a buzz. When you're at a show, you start to hear, kind of what the buzz is. And, and it's funny because on my Instagram, I was getting comments. How did you get pictures? I was in that booth. I couldn't see anything. I said, well, I don't go to that booth till Thursday afternoon. Nobody left. Thursday afternoon. Yeah. So, and then, there's lots going on at a show and there's dinners and stuff like that. But I do come back to my hotel room. Usually the show closes at 4 and maybe you're going out for dinner at 6. And I will spend an hour flipping through kind of my images. And that just kind of tweaks me on, okay, what am I starting to see? And I started seeing that what's old is new thing after the first day. So then now I'm looking for it. But, it is having a plan, because I do see a lot of first timers getting really overwhelmed and they're just walking around like zombies, and they just don't know where to go. And I know I'm not going to be really popular on this next one, but I don't like to do a show in a group. It is too difficult. So even when I've taken designers to shows like this, we get in there, we meet as a group, and I say, okay, let's just everybody go off on their own for an hour. I want you to go off on your own, and then we're going to meet back, right here in an hour or an hour and a half, and we're just going to share what we saw. And I find that designers get way more out of that than a group of 8 people kind of, clomping around the show, because you're losing somebody, you're waiting for somebody. And I do typically do the shows on my own. Maybe my partner sometimes is with me, but I get to see more and experience more, kind of on my own time. So.
I love that. Now, you usually have a blog that highlights all of this. Are you going to have a blog on what happened this time as well?
You may be forcing me, Jason. But
I'm
yeah,
just asking because we usually link the blog
yeah,
but
yeah.
you
I
know.
don't. Yeah, I haven't. It's been a very, very busy year. You know, a lot of clients and a lot of things going on, and you know, the vestibule learning platform is kind of really taking off, and so I've been focusing on that. So I don't have it on my agenda right now. So you know, it's you know, I appreciate it. I'm gonna. You know, I might put something together. Like, you know, I enjoy doing this, and if I do, I'll send you the link.
Everyone's gonna have to listen to the podcast.
Yes, yes,
Absolutely.
That's
That's
yes.
it, you
perfect,
know.
Mary.
Jen, I think your approach is absolutely genius because, and I think it's fascinating listening to you. And actually, when you describe things, I'm like, what is that? Because I'm from Europe and we don't
Yep,
have a lot of
yep,
traditional design.
yep, yep,
So I was
I know.
Googling some of the things as you were
Yeah.
talking about. I'm like, oh, okay. Um,
Mhm,
but I love the way you plan your visit because I've spent many KBISs
mhm,
working in the
mhm.
color booth and
Yeah,
other booths, and it's
yeah,
so true. It's like the first 2 days are complete mayhem, you know,
yeah,
in the
mhm,
popular booths, and then there's nobody.
yeah,
So
mhm,
I think that's really clever.
yeah. And I think, you know, also too, for, you know, for the individual or for the company, this is a big investment. Like, you know, this is
Huge,
not a couple
yes.
$100 for me to, you know,
No.
especially for me to fly across the
Mm-mm,
country and
mm-mm,
you know, like literally me getting there, my 10-hour commute from the West Coast to
mm-mm,
Florida turned into 24 hours the first day. So, you know,
mm-mm.
that's an investment in time
Yes.
and money and everything. So, you know, you know, definitely if you're planning on going or if your company's sending you, you know, I think you owe it to yourself to, you know, to really, you know, get the most out of it. Like it's a privilege to be able to
Yeah.
go to a show like this and be able to experience it and make those connections.
Yeah, now both Jason and I have FOMO because we
I
both
know,
didn't end up going this year, and it's
yeah,
kind of nice because I'm not a big fan of Orlando and trying
yeah,
to get
yeah,
around during a big trade
yeah,
show,
yeah.
but
It was
it
crazy. Hmm.
it always is fun. I have one question for you with regards to just like the general vibe and like as you were talking with people, like what sense did you, because you read like the reports of the industry and so on, but
Hmm.
it's like what
Hmm.
was the general vibe? Were people excited or
Hmm.
what was it like?
Do you know what? I think the general vibe, and it's always going to be positive, you know, at a show like this, other
Mm,
than the traffic. Like you brought up that, you know, I can't see KBIS going back to Orlando. Like when it was taking me
mm,
2 hours to get to a restaurant that
yeah.
was, you know, 2 miles from my
Hmm.
hotel, which was crazy. I even had Uber phone me while I was in an Uber to see if I was okay because my vehicle had not moved for several minutes. So that's, you know, that just kind of sums up the evenings there. But I think the vibe is positive. Maybe the nature, you know, of what I do with vestibule learning of teaching, you know, kitchen designers. I had a lot of different contacts talking to me about, you know, kind of the industry going through this difficult time of trying to hire people.
Mm, mm,
That probably almost every conversation that I had did revolve around that, and it is difficult to hire quote unquote experienced people in this industry because there is
mm,
so much going on and there's, you know, this chaos of choice and, you know, all of these different changes and, you know, all these different things to learn. But you know, I think on the whole, you know, most of the people that I talked to, you know, were pumped about it, and
mm,
you know, I think definitely our industry, you know, is one that is always evolving, and you know, I think our biggest thing is going to be labor shortages, even with AI. Yeah, the AI
mm,
conversation came up quite a bit, and that's definitely going to be creeping in there. But we're still going to need people to
mm,
be doing stuff
mhm,
in our industry, and just how we're going to attract, you know, those bright young minds, you know, to the industry and get them trained and get them excited and, you know, have them, you know, have rewarding careers like I've had in the industry.
mm,
We'll just kind of keep the conversations going, and you know, I think we're back in Vegas again next year. So
mhm. Yeah.
Truck down to that one. It's an easier flight from the West Coast, but yeah, we'll see. You guys will be there. Well, I'll go just because you guys will be there.
Yeah,
I think we're planning on it at this point, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. We'll be there next time. So, so if any of our listeners want to learn more, how do they get in contact with you?
Well, they can, it's a little bit of a work in the progress right now, but they can pop onto my website, Vestibule, which is VESTABUL.com. And there's contact sheets there that the contact page that you can get a hold of me. And, that's where I've got my online learning with the kitchen industry. So that would definitely be the best one. And I'd love to hear from them, and maybe I will get a blog. I haven't written a blog for about a year because, just with circumstances, and maybe I will get a blog out and get people to, comment on their experience at KBIS 2026.
Awesome. Well, we always enjoy having you for these wrap ups. We hope to have you again next year as well.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So we hope to hear and see you all here in 2 weeks on Designer Discussions.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Designer Discussions and all of the helpful information. Subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. We look forward to having you back next week. For more information on the podcast and the marketing studio, visit designerdiscussions.com and follow us on social media.